Huh. We haven't seen one of these before on the TheApostleP channel, and I'm pretty excited to have it. We have from Ferrum Forge, Elliott Williamson, a Ferox from the Sharpening bench. This one courtesy of Richard Blade Dragon, one of my favorite sharpening customers. And this is a pretty cool knife, guys. Stay with me and we will look it over and talk about it a bit. Hi gang, Rob here. It is the evening of April 2015, and I am pretty excited. I've been so backed up at the sharpening bench, and this has been lying in the safe for about a month. And I knew it was there, and I couldn't, in good conscience, jump it to the front of the line. That wouldn't be right. So it waited patiently for me. And let's look at it, shall we? You guys remember my video on small knife makers and expectations? I talked a lot about Jason Browse knives in that video. Here's another great example of this concept. Elliott Williamson Ferrum Forge Knife Works. Cool logo too, isn't it? An F pointing that way, an F pointing that way, and a KW for Knife Works. Just a great looking logo. You know, Elliott sort of sprang to prominence with his most notable custom folder, the Pretium, which was just a beautiful knife. And that was more expensive. I think, you know, most of those up around $1,000, maybe more, full customs. And they really sold well. He only made 100 of them, and they are still a very hot commodity on the secondary market. And very quickly, Elliott turned his attention to mid-tech, quote-unquote, knives. So a little higher volume of production, a little more help from other folks. And the Ferox is sort of the first result of that line of thinking. That's the model we're looking at in front of the camera today. And it is it's pretty cool. I like almost everything about it. And let's take a look at what we've got here. We have a blade 3.5 inches long and kind of an interesting shape, don't you think? I guess I'm going to call this a drop point. It's got this sort of almost lion steel SR sort of rise in the blade and then just drops to the tip a little bit. About a 3/4 flat grind coming from 4.5 millimeter, about 172 thousandths inch stock, down to a very, very thin dimension behind the edge. This one I sharpened, of course, and I did it at my preferred geometry of 15 degrees per side, secondary bevel with about a 19-degree micro, and look, not very broad at all. That tells me nice and thin behind the edge. It's actually a knife. Ha! Pretty cool. The steel, this gets curiouser and curiouser. Frankly, I would never choose this steel. It is CPM 4V. So it is a high, well, it is a sort of plain carbon tool steel with Crucible's powdered metal technology, micro ingots, I guess we would call them. I can't call it a high carbon tool steel because it doesn't have that much carbon in it. Has a boatload of vanadium and not a lot of chromium, so I guess it's pretty tough. You know, there's some other elements, a little molybdenum and stuff, making it into a tough sort of not plain carbon tool steel, but not high carbon tool steel, sort of a modern non-stainless tool steel, let's call it. It is able to achieve pretty doggone high hardness because of its vanadium carbide rich microstructure, which makes it, you know, kind of chunky. Not quite as well as CPM M4, which just seems to be a little bit finer microstructure steel. I'm just not a lover of vanadium carbides. They're very big, they're very hard. The microstructure of the steel around them kind of wears away and leaves big teeth. Makes it pretty hard to get to a very keen edge and a high polish while sharpening. And frankly, I just don't see much need for that in a folder. But you know what? It's going to be the buzzword steel of 2015 and 2016. Well, because, you know, 3V is really tough and everybody loves it. And what would be better than 3V? Well, 4V would be better, because it's 4, not 3. We are something else, we knife nuts. The next new thing is always better, isn't it? I say not. I would have preferred this knife in S30V, S35VN, CTS 204P, 20CV. You know, just there are a lot of really good steels nowadays, and I think 3V and 4V are probably great steels for big old honking choppers that you don't really care what they look like after they get a little use on them. This steel, like 3V before it, and also like CPM M4, will tend to spot on you. And I noticed when I took this one apart after sharpening, you're going to have to look real close to see this, but there's some spotting in that rather rough satin grind. Just look right below that rearmost jimping peak. It's there. That's just from the knife being closed up in its case, and who knows what humidity's in the air, and there's no bag of desiccant. It is what it is, and it's going to do that more. So if you like knives to show the character of corrosion, maybe 4V is a really good choice. I just think there are steels that perform comparably well without that problem, and that are easier to sharpen. The finish on this blade, obviously the whole knife blade was stonewashed. The spine is stonewashed, the primary grind is stonewashed, and then Elliott has done what appears to be a pretty coarse hand-rubbed satin. It could be a belt sander satin, leaving a lot of exposed peaks. It's handsome. I'm not sure it's the best choice for this steel, because if the whole blade were stonewashed, we wouldn't get that spotting. The handles are 6AL 4V titanium. Pretty handsomely done too. Obviously CNC machined, beautifully stonewashed. Edges are nicely broken. A very nice change of plane here at the top of the handle near the spine. Just a little recessed, relieved area right here. Don't know if it adds any comfort or any ergonomics to the knife, but it sure is handsome. The lock bar cutout it appears to be water jetted. There, it's a little rough in the void there. Interesting choice to put sort of a zigzag in the lock bar cutout. The relief cut is on the inside, and it is small. There's a lot of meat left there, which means lots of lock bar tension. I never have a problem with lots of lock bar tension. I think it's a pretty darn good thing. Construction, we have open pillar construction. Nicely sculpted and blue anodized titanium standoffs, which are shouldered, and then we've got a shouldered stop pin. And I like the external stop pin. I'm not a big fan of cutting big slots in knife blade tangs. It weakens the knife. I like this setup, and a very ingenious pivot system. This is the female side of the pivot in the correct location on the lock bar side, so you can stack assemble the knife with the female side down. And it appears to be It is not a D-shaped pivot, but it does not move. When it's in tight and you're screwing the male side in, the female side doesn't spin. I don't know if it's tapered or if that's just the steel biting against the titanium harder than the titanium pivot, male pivot screw bites against the titanium frame, but it works. It doesn't spin. As long as you have that female pivot seated in the frame, works great. Well, obviously, if I'm telling you that, that means I had the knife apart for cleaning and lubrication. And why don't we take a look at a picture. Most of the knife internally done very well, but there's one thing I noticed that was a little disturbing on the blade tang area. Just take a look at that and we'll come back and talk about it. Yeah, it appears that maybe a Dremel tool and a drum sander was used on both sides of the blade tang. I'm not sure why. Don't know, how that really affects the smoothness of the knife. It is a caged ball bearing pivot suspension system, and it's frankly, not the smoothest thing I've ever used. It seems to be getting better as the knife breaks in just a bit. It is a free dropping knife. Now, when the detent ball is riding on the blade tang, it doesn't, close on your fingers like a guillotine, but it shakes closed pretty nicely, a little bit tighter than a lot of knives are set up in this genre. Whoops. But I kind of like that. Blade centering is excellent. Flipping action rocks. The pivot's tiny, got to tell you that. Not 1/8 of an inch. I mean, you can see the button head, which is scarcely more than 1/8 of an inch. So the barrel of the pivot, less than 1/8 of an inch, probably about 100 thousandths, and a pretty tiny ring of ball bearings. Big old 6.3 ounce folding knife with a tiny pivot and tiny ball bearings. That's a little curious to me. The handle is 4 7/8 inches long, which gives the knife an overall length of 8 3/8 inches. A little over 1/2 an inch thick, about 512 thousandths. And the pocket clip is nothing special except that it's blue anodized titanium. Kind of looks like the old Kershaw butter knife clip, doesn't it? With a little taper for a girlish figure. The clip works great though, guys. And you're not going to hear me complain about a plain clip that works. I love this clip. It is one-hand insertable. It holds the knife securely, and it extracts very nicely. It's kind of a masterpiece in its simplicity. Some of you guys who are audiophiles in the 80s, you remember NAD turntables. They kind of looked like a kid's toy, but they were like the best sound quality of any turntable you could buy for under $2,000. That's what this clip reminds me of. Just straight to the point. A little blue for a little flare, and it works. So we got blue standoffs, blue clip, blue male pivot screw, and although it's T10 manipulable, it's got some nice machining details in it, don't you think? Let's talk about ergonomics real quick. Flipping action, well, it ought to be good. It's a ball bearing flipper with a flipper that's like 3 feet long. The flipping action's great, whether you light switch, whether you push button. It's a rocket, no doubt about that. It ought to be with a flipper that long, right? Now I'm going to try to close this left-handed. It is one of those knives where you got to be back on the lock bar in order for the knife to clear the detent ball, which is awkward. You come up here in a natural position, and yeah, I'm still on the ball. And it's got the Hoback rolling detent, which I do not love. I think the adjustability is frivolous. I think the maker should put the detent ball in the right place and let it ride. And I don't really understand how the detent ball rubbing against the inside of that cup produces a lot less friction than the detent ball rubbing along the blade tang, unless the blade tang is very rough, and this one kind of is, but doesn't need to be. I think a properly set fixed detent ball is every bit as smooth, and this knife doesn't feel any smoother than any fixed ball detent I've ever seen. I love Jake Hoback, but I just think maybe the rolling detent might be the emperor with no close, maybe. But I bet you it sells knives. You guys can hear that. You can hear the friction. It's not so smooth. You know, it's not like a miracle, not by any means. So when you're closing it left-handed, I was saying you got to be way back here on the lock bar. Okay, I'm clear. But now look what happens. That big old flipper hits my middle finger. So it's kind of this deal. Get it past the detent ball and then sort of shake it closed. I don't love that method. If I bought one of these, I bet you when I got done with it, that flipper tab would be about half that long. But that's really the only ergonomic hit I'm going to give this knife, is the closing of it. When gripping the knife in a saber grip, it is beautiful. In a forward saber grip with a generous forward choil, it is beautiful. And I didn't even have to put that there. It's beautiful. Draw cut grip. Even with that big long flipper, the angle does not wrap severely back in this direction, so it's very comfortable. Doesn't irritate the web of the hand. Hammer grip. Again, very comfortable. The long flipper tab does not irritate the hand. Let's go reverse grip. It's very good. Ergos are superb other than closing the knife. The blade shape is just awesome. Great for utility. There's enough mass to it to be a chopper if you need it to be in a 3.5-inch folder, which you probably wouldn't. The tip is straight ahead enough to be a good piercer. Just a great tactical design, I think. A great soldier knife. That 4V steel, you could dig in the dirt with it all day long and not chip your edge up too bad. You know, it's going to get black spots, but oh well. All in all, a pretty good effort. I think these sold new for, what, around $435, $450, which invites a comparison. There's a $485 micarta inlay large Sebenza 21. And here's where we're going to make that new small independent maker point. Yes, it has a flipper and ball bearings. Yes, it has a HRD, Hoback rolling detent. In my opinion, none of those things, the flipper, the ball bearings, the HRD, none of those things make it a better knife than a Sebenza. And when you look inside and you look at grinds and you look at finishes, this is worth more. This is worth more than this. Objectively, it's a better made knife. Now, however, we've got a custom maker, a relatively young custom maker, doing some pretty doggone good work. You know, and let's just talk about reality. If this knife is a full custom, it's a $1,000 knife, and it's probably not a lot better finished or more precise than this mid-tech at sort of half that price. And we got a small company just getting going with what looks to me like a great amount of potential. And a really nicely designed knife. Other than some subjective issues I have with it, which are, you know, my preferences against ball bearings and flippers, and the fact that I'm a left-hander and it's not really an easy knife to close left-handed, I'd buy this knife, and I'd happily pay this money for it, because I think it's really well done. I think there are a lot of knives that are sort of appealing to the same market as the Ferox that are as much or more money that just can't hold a candle to it. Remember, yeah, sure, it weighs 6.3 ounces, a little heavy, And the perfect balance point, by the way. Perfect. Just perfect. It's a little heavy, but it's not 9 ounces heavy. And it's a little bit thick in the blade stock, 4.5 millimeters, but it's not stupid thick. And it'll cut. You know, I really wish, you know, other companies who sell $400 or $500 knives would grind their blades this thinly behind the edge. Hinderer. I think this is a pretty solid effort. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention, pinned and screwed steel lock bar insert. No slip, no stick. Superb lockup. I mean, superb. What would I do different? Of course, I'd put a thumb stud right here. I'd put phosphor bronze washers in it. I'd get rid of the flipper, and I'd use a little larger pivot. And that's about it. But you know what? Elliott's a pretty cool dude. He'd make you that knife if you called him. He's one of those guys. Yeah, he'll actually make you a knife. He'll talk about what you want and make it for you. Might take him a couple years, but he'll do it. Maybe we need to talk. But for a first mid-tech or low-volume production knife, this Ferox absolutely rocks. It just does. You know, I'm going to sort of look past what appeals to me subjectively. And I'm going to say 8 out of 10 for this one. Price considered, maybe 8.5. So support your local knife maker. Pick up something from Ferrum Forge, and a Ferox would not be a bad idea at all. That's all for this one. Grace to you and peace, my friends, from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember the word in Richard Ferox. I forgot to do this. And Richard's Ferox, I forgot to do this earlier, are sharp. Yes, it is. Have a good night, guys.